morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. And I know it's a little later in the week than I like to cut it, but that's just the way things worked out this week. And I'm really excited about it. And we'll be talking about that case later in the program. Of course, we have a lot to talk about tonight. I think a lot of people are going to be tuning in, given a lot of things that have been going on in the true crime community as a whole, and then specifically a couple of cases that two of which Unfound is covered, and one that Unfound is going to cover in the near future that I'm going to be talking about. And I'm really believing that tonight's show may set a record for length. So I hope everybody gets comfortable. That's all I can tell you. But Carrie and Chandra and Carol, Whitney, James, Lekar, Jasmine, Cherie. Cherie is going to be wielding a very mighty moderator wrench tonight, so no messing around. Laura, Susan, Valerie, Indy, thanks everybody for tuning in tonight. Like I said, I'm guessing that we're going to have a pretty big crowd, and so I want to make sure I don't start in anything. We'll have to usually, this isn't going to be, I'm not going to cater to any particular crowd tonight. So if you're waiting for a particular topic, you're just going to have to be patient. I'm not going to alter the programming of the program, because don't worry, we're going to cover everything. Troy, Tanya, Kimberly, Heather, Rick, BJ, Terry, thank you all for tuning in tonight, wherever you are. And it is now 9 o'clock, so let's, hey Joyce, what's going on? I hope I'm loud enough for you this week, Joyce. Make sure to turn that volume up. It's 9 o'clock, so Eastern time, so let's get started. A lot to talk about tonight. We're going to be talking about plagiarism. We're going to talk about the Tiffany Johnson trial that's going on. We're, of course, going to be talking about Tom Brown's case and things that transpired just today. We're going to be talking about the Jonathan Estes case that we just covered not so long ago. And I'm taking a couple questions from the audience tonight. And, of course, I'm going to talk about Friday's case, which is a disappearance that happened in Columbus, Ohio. Of course, Columbus, Ohio is a city that we've covered in a prior case with Jamie Bowen. Paula and Happy and Ann, Becky, Michelle, thank you everybody for tuning in tonight. Let's start here. There's going to be a meetup. I know Cherie is going to like that I'm bringing this up first. That there is going to be a meetup in Houston, Texas at the Black Walnut Cafe on, what is it? Today is the 21st. Saturday at the Black Walnut Cafe in Houston. If you want any details on that, if you live within a couple hours of the location, I'm taking for granted that it's starting sometime in the evening, maybe 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Then you should contact Cherie. Cherie is the moderator for all of the Unfound live shows, and you can see her in blue if you are in here in the live chat. She is with the blue with the wrench. That is Cherie. She is organizing it, so I'm hoping that some people can show up. Of course, we already had one in the Dallas area, and then there was one in Amarillo. Of course, I showed up for that one, and then there is going to be one in Houston, Texas on Saturday. Please consider showing up. Of course, you're going to have a lot to talk about on Saturday, and I'm not going to spoil it for anybody. I will not be there. I'm not going to be surprising anybody, but it's still worth it to go to meet Cherie. She might be able to give you maybe a few stories from behind the scenes of working with me, being one of my assistants. So maybe that'll be interesting to you. And I hope that you will show up. Jill, Melody, Christy, Katrina, Angel, Jeff. I hope everybody is doing great tonight. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. So remember, Saturday, Houston, Texas, meetup, Black Walnut Cafe. Next, I want to talk about before probably the middle of next week, I will have volume 1 of season 2 completed and of the book series. That'll be my first book for season 2. And those, the cases covered in that will be Kent Jacobs, Aaron Gilbert, Tammy Leppert, Crystal Morrison, Chris Turner, Linda Carroll, and Nikki McCown. I still have to look over one transcript and write the final chapter, and that book will be done. So I'm very close to the end, and I hope to get that done. Once again, beginning of next week, probably. Angel says need to have a central Pennsylvania meetup. Angel, you're more than welcome to line that up. Redhead, Christina, Carrie can't make it Saturday. Mandolin, Brenda. Brenda, the audio all depends on how you're listening to the program. The Dope Patrol, and maybe you just want to block that. Cherie, just a suggestion. I'm looking up Andy to get familiar with the case. Yes, Andy Chapman will be Friday's case, in which I will talk about before we are done tonight. And, okay. So we had volume 1 of season 2. I'm excited about that. And for many transcribers, specifically the transcribers from volume 6 of season 1, volume 1 of season 2, volume 2 of season 2, you should be getting a surprise package in the mail within the next 10 days. So if any of you are in the chat tonight and you've worked on one of those books, please look for a package from me. So there you go. So there's volume 2, the poll. For the disappearance of Stephanie, who we covered last Friday, the poll concerned Tiger and what do we think the paperwork had to do with, if it existed, and what could the motive, if he did something to Stephanie, what do we think happened? And a majority of you, a large majority of you believe that if he did something to her, it had to do with Stephanie wanting a divorce from him. Of course, there are a lot of different things that, like on Sunday night in the think tank that we talked about, including the possibility that a divorce was the reason. This is one of those cases where until it's solved, if Stephanie's remains are found, or if she's out there still alive somewhere and they track her down, I don't know if we'll ever know the reason for this disappearance until it is solved. Okay? I think there's just too much maybe going on with Stephanie, with Tiger, maybe a prior issue with her mental health, etc., to really be able to put a finger on it. But a majority of the people in the Unfound podcast discussion group decided that the Tiger is responsible, and it most likely had to do with Stephanie wanting a divorce from him and maybe him not wanting to give her one. That's what the talk about the paperwork was. So if you are not in the discussion group, please become a member on Facebook. And if you've not yet voted in that poll, the poll is still up in the discussion group, and I hope that you will take part in it and express your opinion regarding the case that we covered last Friday. Next weekend, so August, what would it be? Tonight, the 23rd, the 30th, 31st, 1st, 2nd, I'm going to be in Orlando, Florida. I'm going to be taking part in a disc golf tournament. It's 3 days. It's Saturday, Sunday, and half of Monday on Labor Day. And so I will be out of communication a little more than usual. Next weekend, I'm going to be driving over there Thursday. The episode will come out on Friday as usual. However, probably will be another one that's released early in the morning. And then I play on Saturday and Sunday and half of Monday. Very long. I hope I play well. We shall see. But I'm just going to be warning you of that now. But probably next Friday's episode probably will have an announcement in it as well. It's a really big tournament, probably 400 people, men and women competing. over in Orlando, Florida, and I'm going to be rooming with a very good friend of mine. His name is Trevor, who also lives here in Clearwater Beach. Uh, then after that comes September 6th, September 7th through September 14th. I'm going to be in Canada with my dad, my best friend Doug, and his son Tanner. And so I don't know what kind of internet connection, Wi Fi. I know I've been to this cottage before. This kind of, it's not a campground, but we've been to these cabins before. They do have Wi Fi. It's just I don't remember how fast it was, how good it was. If it is possible to do a live show while I am in Canada, I will do it. If not, then we're just going to have to skip it. However, there will be episodes coming out both the Friday, September 7th, or September 6th, and September 13th. One will be a third anniversary program, and the other one will be an update episode that I will be recording this weekend. Happy says, I do think he did something regarding Tiger. Did something. It's hard to find a motive, especially since she had been putting up with him this infidelity. Happy, I agree with you regarding Stephanie's case. Absolutely true that it's really hard given everything. And I kind of feel like it was Julie C's case in that it seems Stephanie wanted to talk a lot about Tiger and talk this, but she never gave any specifics regarding this paperwork. Of course, in Julie's case, she said some guy was harassing her and never gave anybody his name. So it's very difficult and Happy. So I agree with you. Emily says, we'll love to have a meetup in central Pennsylvania. Well, Emily, you need to get together with Angel, who posted that just a little, like 10 minutes ago. Maybe you two can get together and make something happen. That would be cool. Yay for early releases, Paula says. Thank you, Casey, for the good luck. I'm going to need it in the tournament. So I have a lot going on up within the next couple weeks. Traveling, playing, going to be out, driving to Pennsylvania, driving to Canada, and then I will probably be back in Florida probably around September 16th. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in Pennsylvania. I will be almost automatically, almost immediately coming back here. But I will be in Pennsylvania from approximately the 5th to, or up out of Florida from the 5th to approximately the 16th, something like that. Lake Car, it all depends on how you're listening to it. A lot of people are saying the volume is fine. I can't help it. I'm sorry. A troll. I need to talk about this. If some of you don't know, and I know that I knew about this before we covered this case, that there is a well-known troll that has been following the Bonnie Dagus, along with her son's disappearance, Jeremy, for a very long time, well before Unfound ever covered the case. And of course, Bonnie and Jeremy Dagis's disappearance is one we covered quite a while ago. In fact, let me check how long ago we covered that. It's been a while. That came out December 28th of 2018. So it's been a while. Well, before that, there's a guy. His name is Christian Underkoffler, and he is from Ohio. And for many years, he has been trolling both followers of the case. Linda Hirschberger, who of course was my guest, that was Bonnie's mother, been trolling her for many, many years, saying that he is Jeremy Dagus, so Bonnie Dagis's daughter, but of course Jeremy. So he's saying he is the missing grandson of Linda Hirschberger. The problem is, it's obvious to everyone that this guy is a troll. He can be very rude, very mean. I've never had any interactions with him, but my assistant Emily has. And she had to finally she blocked him, I think, a few times. I think he had a couple different accounts going on Facebook. Well, finally, the law in Florida finally caught him in Ohio and they've brought him to Florida to face charges, making threats, etc. So I don't know if how many of you knew about this guy. I don't know if you've ever seen any of his posts anywhere, but he has been harassing Linda Hirschberger and her family for a very long time. And I don't know if he's ever had to pay any penalties for it before, but uh, he is finally in custody. I don't know, of course, he's not going to be in his jail for life, but it's nice to see that the police were paying attention and finally went and got him and brought him to Florida because of the things that he had said and threatened and everything else toward Linda and the rest of her family. And on top of everything else, pretending to be her grandson is, the worst thing ever. So I don't know. I had posted something about it. I don't know how many of you knew about it. Some of you might have even seen this when I posted it in the group. They were like, "Well, what's this?" But he is now in custody, and maybe he'll learn his lesson. I'm guessing he probably won't, but he's not able to troll anybody right at this second. Cherie says, unbelievable how many trolls pop up on the Amanda Fravel page, at least one a week. Cherie, I think just about every case has them. True. Hello? I'm not going to say that word. Carrie, we've had a few on David's page as well. Yeah, they're sick people, Carrie, for sure. It is horrible, Marcy. Mandy never understand trolls. I don't know what to. I really don't know what to make of Christian Underkoffler. He may just be a horrible, horrible guy, or he has some mental thing going on. I really don't know. But so I don't know. But he was pretending, and that's the worst. I realize, he's harassing, threatening. He's one of those trolls that's just looking to start a fight. Emily sent me copies of the conversations that she and had back and forth. Very demeaning and dismissive and everything else. And but I think that whatever he and Emily, the exchanges they had, were nothing compared to what Linda has been putting up with for a very, very long time. So there's that. So you can look up that story. Christian Underkoffler, Underkofler, is how you spell his last name. But and also, being that I know many of you know Emily, maybe you could even ask her about him as well. So there you go. Tiffany Johnson, that trial is still going on. That is a case that I hope to cover eventually, maybe in late September, October, once the trial is over. Chris Revel has been charged with kidnapping. We talked about this last week. Charged with kidnapping and a few other charges regarding Tiffany Johnson. She is still missing. Of course, it is believed he did something to her. But I've been in contact with her Aunt Janelle, who is going to the trial, has been there every day. And I really don't know how much I can say, but she seems to think that the trial is going very well for the prosecution. That is her general statement regarding that. Chris took the stand, I believe, already. And he's trying to point the finger at some guy who was supposed to work on Tiffany Johnson's car. He's saying, I have no idea what happened to her. I got in my car and left. She got in the car with somebody else. You might want to look at this guy who was supposed to work on her car. So there you go. But from what Janelle says, she believes that the trial is going very well. And of course, she hopes that Chris is convicted of kidnapping and the other charges. But I don't know if that's going to be enough to, if they find him guilty, I don't know if that's going to be enough to find out what happened to Tiffany. I don't know if you believe that he's guilty and that he kidnapped her, then he has to know where she is. And I don't know if he's going to give that up. And we talked about this last week. Um, okay, some people here talking about putting a get together in central Pennsylvania, being that that is my home state. I'm very excited about that, although I am from southwestern Pennsylvania. Yeah, Carrie, go pin that for Angel and see what can happen. Casey, if you can't hear it, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. So let's move on to, and I know you're looking for Tom Brown information, but I'm going to cover a couple other things first because once again, I think that they're important to talk about. Jonathan Estes. The other breaking news besides Tom Brown information and news is that the Bobcat, if you'll go back to Jonathan Estes' case, that's a case where he was at home. He said he was going to go out and talk to the police that were driving up and down his road. Then he disappeared. And there are a lot of theories on that case, but one of the big facts of that case is that a Bobcat that he owned disappeared. Or it was actually his father's Bobcat, and it was somewhere and it disappeared. And it's believed that Jonathan Estes's wife, who I think is considered a suspect, a person of interest in his disappearance, sold it, but she wouldn't say who she sold it to. She wouldn't say where it was, who it was, nothing. The Bobcat has been found. Now, I put in a message to Melissa, Jonathan's sister, who was the guest, and I really don't know. She sent me a message back, and I'm reading it right now, but I don't know if I can divulge it. But it seems she does know where it was found. Okay. So I'm reading what she wrote to me. I'm just going to leave it off the record for now, but it does seem that the Estes family does know where it was found and who bought it. And of course, now they're looking into the circumstances of how this person got it. But I think this, I don't know how big of a part of the case it is, but it was a strange one. And it's now that that has all been figured out. I don't know if that's going to solve the disappearance or not, but at least they can get that part of it out of the way. And maybe this guy who bought it, if he's going to cooperate with the police, and I hope he does, maybe he has some knowledge that maybe he didn't realize he had about Jonathan's disappearance. We'll just have to see. But I think it's safe to say that the Bobcat was not found in the same town of where this disappearance happened. And once again, I wish I could say more, but I don't know how much I'm allowed to say. Maybe Melissa's going to post something about it. If she does, that's great, and somebody can share it in the group. Terry says she saw that post about the Bobcat being found. Cherie says, can't wait to find out about the owner of the Bobcat. Like I said, he is a known entity. They know his name, and I think they've, he's been talked to and everything else. I don't know. It sounds to me like he's totally an innocent bystander in this, but we'll see. Mandy says Jonathan Estes' case blew her mind. Carrie says, I hope the person they recovered from sings like a songbird. We're going to see if he has any information. So that was a case that Unfound covered. What it seems like we covered that yesterday, but I know it's been a little while. That was June 28th. It seems like yesterday, folks. That we covered that case. Whether Unfound had anything to do with this Bobcat being found, I have no idea. I hope we did. I really don't know. I don't know if Melissa knows that either, but I know that on the Jonathan Estes page, she says that it was due to tips coming in that helped them find this Bobcat. So maybe some Unfound listener listened to it and said, hey, I know something. I really don't know. Hello, Miranda. Good to see you. You're back. It could be a key, Cherie. We're just not sure. All right. Let's talk about plagiarism. Now, I want to tell you something. I already talked about this last week, and it was because of a question that Jill, who is a member of the think tank, who has been a longtime supporter of Unfound, in fact, being that she is a mental health professional, she and I have had at least one conversation about getting inside the mind of, you know, of some of these people who seem to walk off, or, for example, young men who end up in rivers. She and I had a conversation about this smiley face conspiracy theory and all of that, and I think that happened last summer, so I know Jill. Well, she had asked me last week about how do I feel about other shows ripping Unfound off, and I talked about it. Little did I know that plagiarism from I had no idea. Honestly, I had no idea that this story was coming out. But now there is a huge story that's all over the internet now, multiple locations, about how this very well known, and I didn't even know, I've heard of it, I didn't know it was allegedly #1 on iTunes and everything, called The Crime Junkies, and how they were accused of plagiarism and just blatantly ripping off reporters from local news sources, newspapers, media sites, TV, or whatever, and just blatantly putting that information into their shows like verbatim and not giving anybody credit. Okay? And I understand. I've never listened to the show. I don't know the hosts. I don't know what they do, which shouldn't surprise any of you because you know that I pretty much just stick to my own work. And that's why even when people say, hey, Ed, do you know that this other podcast just ripped you off? It's news to me. It's really news to me because I just concentrate on my own work. And the nice thing is when you concentrate on your own work, the odds of you ripping somebody else off are very, very low. So, plagiarism is a problem in true crime podcasting. And I'm not here to pick on the true crime junkies or anybody else. I'm not here to pick on any of them. Okay? But I know this. I've known this forever. And I think that just recently, I think it's a combination of things. I think it's a combination of, I think people are starting to notice this more and more because I think many hosts have gotten away with it for so long that they can become more and more and more comfortable with it. And then you pass that tipping point where people start to realize, wow, that seems like something I've read before or heard before. I think it's that. And I think now that I think the reason I'm talking about it now is I think after 140 cases, I can start voicing my opinions on these things. After 30 cases, after 30 episodes of Unfound, no. But we're coming up on the 3-year anniversary, and this isn't, you do something for 3 years, 7 days a week. And at some point, I think that you can start to form opinions with what is going on in the work that you do. And this just isn't in podcasting, but as an accountant, a lawyer, a doctor, a teacher, or anything else. That you can start talking about the problems in the law profession, the problems in teaching, the problems in engineering, and everything else. And, I've known about this for a long time. I've just never talked about it. The reason I know it, and the thing is, I know it even though I don't follow hardly any other true crime podcasts. The reason I know it is because I know how much work goes into putting these episodes together every week. Okay, I know. There's nobody knows it more than I do. I think Cherie knows it. I think Emily knows it. A couple other people who have assisted with the program know it. But being that I started Unfound, I interview the people. I record it myself. I do the interviews, everything. I know more than anybody else connected to this program how much work it is. And this isn't to pat myself on the back. I'm only saying this because each one of us only has 24 hours a day and 7 days in a week, okay? And nobody could be working on their program more than I work on Unfound. It's just not possible. And I have the benefit of I'm not married, I don't have any kids, etc. And I do this full time. So I know how much work it takes to turn out an episode every week. And I know that there is some stress that goes along with that. So when I hear listeners tell me that certain podcasters are going on tours of the United States and doing this and doing that, and it has nothing to do with them actually putting out episodes every week, then that starts to tell me they must be taking shortcuts. Kayla, what's going on? Hello, Kayla. Good to see you tonight. LaFord, some panelists, some people just getting in now. That's okay. I start to realize when I hear these things, because I can tell you from my own experience, just me driving to Amarillo and back. Now, I'm glad I went. I think I had a responsibility to be there. I left on a Tuesday morning. I got back on a Saturday morning. So essentially, I missed a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of really not being able to do any unfound work that has to do with an episode. Obviously, I was doing work. I was there. I went to Canadian. I was with Penny. I went to the meetup. And that's all great stuff. And I loved every second of it. But that stuff really doesn't have anything to do with churning an episode out. So what do you have to do? You have to do the episode before you leave. Well, that's just once. And I know just in going those days how much I got behind on other things that I have to do. Well, there are podcasters out there who seem to be doing this all the time, and I don't know how they do it. I don't know how. Hey, Susie, what's going on? I don't know how they do it. And so I can only believe that all this research and studying and everything else must be a sham. That's how I figured it out. Okay, that's how I figured it out. And then that's what caught my attention. And then I started looking into some of these things and I was like, you know what, Ed, you're right. You're right. Their research is copying and pasting. That's their research. They go to Wikipedia, they go to the local news stories, they go to Web Sleuths, and they just take those things and it's not like they're calling it their own. It's they're taking credit for work that they didn't do. All right? That's the big thing. Okay? And they are, in the Crime Junkies situation, they're making tons and tons and tons of money copying and pasting from other people. Now, I realize somebody in the group said, well, that's not a crime. Well, it isn't a crime in the traditional sense of the word, but just allow it to happen to you and it's going to feel like a crime. Nobody really, it's one of those things where it seems like there are people dismissing it. But these are the same people, if they were being ripped off, they'd be ticked off. And, the crime, and I've seen them, they're in the discussion group coming to the defense of what these two women were doing. And it's just wrong. It's just wrong. I guess for me, I come from an entertainment background, which is really hilarious given that I don't consider Unfound to be entertainment at all. It's news. It's a news program. It's not an entertainment program, even though my background is in entertainment. Well, the worst thing that a person can ever do in entertainment is rip somebody else off. And maybe that's why I'm so conscious about that. I like to be original. And so it's been obvious to me. And people ask me, well, don't you feel bad about people ripping you off? Well, it's like I said last week, plagiarism is the sincerest form of flattery. These people who rip other programs off do it because these other programs, or the Charlie Project and Megan Good, the reason they do it is because those shows and the Charlie Project and those programs are so damn good. They rip them off because they're good, not because they're bad. So if I'm getting ripped off, it must mean that other people must find my program worth it to rip off. It also helps that I do original material and I don't rip anybody off. You know, even when I do the summary of the case, I give Megan good credit because I use her paragraphs as a little bit of a template of what I'm going to write. Even though I think if people were to read my paragraphs, they aren't much like what Megan does. But I will say that I read her paragraph just to get a feeling of the tone I should have. I admit I do that, and that's why I give her credit, and she knows that. Other than that, everything about Unfound is 100% original. Original. Original themes, original summations, etc. All right? And so I realized that they do these things for a variety of reasons. They're lazy, they don't think it's wrong, and really I think it's just because they just want to be famous. And this is the other big problem um, in true crime. It's a huge problem that people don't get into this to solve cases. They get into this because they are using it as a vehicle to become famous and to make money. All right? I read that Variety.com article about it, and what was it? What was in it? How they're all worried about they're wanting to have a 7-digit business, so they want to be able to make $1 million a year. It talks about their UTA agent, etc. Okay? Here's news. I do not have an agent. I do not need an agent. I do not want an agent. All right? And sure as heck, I'm not making 7 figures a year, which I don't know if all of that stuff is true or not. But I think that's the reason that a lot of people get into it. They find out that true crime is popular. It's popular among the public. And so they want to be popular too. Whereas for me, I keep telling this story even though people don't believe it. When I started doing true crime podcasting, I had no idea how popular it was. No idea. Zero. Zero idea. Zero idea. I got in it because I thought it would be cool to solve some cases and cover it away to maybe help these people out, solve some cases, and not just, be a real Columbo. Be a Sherlock Holmes, not to rip my friend Anthony off. To be a real investigator, real reporter, Woodward and Bernstein. That was my motivation. It was not to be famous. And I don't, I guess I am some famous in some quarters, but it's not something that I've ever aspired to. And I'm sorry I'm not reading all of your comments, but I thank you, for the things that you said. There's something else that you need to realize about this, and it goes, and this is even a deeper problem than everything I've already talked about. Beginning of September will be the 3-year anniversary of Unfound. 3 years. Okay? As you know, this is an independent program. I don't work for any company except Edward Denzel Incorporated. Okay? That's me. I don't have any bosses. The bosses are the listeners. You, the listeners, the viewers, you are the bosses. You determine whether Unfound continues or it does not continue. Okay? And I realize that. And I never, ever forget that with every episode that I do. The books I write, this live show, the think tank, I never forget that. You are my bosses. And I think that I do a fairly popular program. I realize it's not popular as Crime Junkies or Generation Y or anything like that. But here's what I know. On Podomatic, which is the place that hosts the program, that's how it gets to iTunes and Spotify and everything else, I am either number 1 or number 2 in the news section every week, every day, every hour. And I'm generally in the top 10 in about of 20,000 podcasts, and they're in the top 10. And in those 3 years, And you know what we've done. We've done a lot of good work. Tom Brown's case, Amanda Fravel's case, Suzanne Lau's case. Done a lot of good work. I mean, we could go on and on. Aaron Gilbert's case, Kent Jacobs' case. A lot of people. I mean, Peggy and Pat McDaniel's case. I mean, we've done, between myself, my assistants, the listeners, we've done a lot of good work in 3 years. Okay? We've affected people's lives. And not once has a podcast company ever contacted me about bringing me in as one of their popular programs. Not once. I've had 6 different TV production companies contact me, not one podcast company, not Wondery, nothing. That should tell you something. That should tell you something about their motivations and about what they think is important for true crime podcasting. It does nothing to do with solving stuff and moving cases forward, anything else. It has everything to do with the fame, the entertainment, amusing people. That's what they want. That's what they want. That's the only conclusion I can come to after 3 years. Not once. Even though, and as you know, I keep talking about this. I don't care if I'm ever on TV or not. I will entertain any possibilities, and if I agree to it, I will work 100% to make it a success. But I've never contacted a TV production company once myself to start. They've all found me. So people know that I'm out there. People know that Unfound's out there. These TV people know the good work we're doing, but in the genre that Unfound is in, no contact. And I'm not saying that I want to be part of it, but they haven't even contacted me, tells me where their minds are. That tells me something. And that should concern all of you. And this is, to bring right into this is the one reason I don't go to CrimeCon. You go to the actual company that runs CrimeCon, they are there to take advantage of trends. They do not run CrimeCon because it's going to solve any crimes or it's going to educate any people. They do it because they see an opportunity, no different than a company that sees an opportunity when the hula hoop gets popular again. When bell bottoms come back. When dresses with shoulder pads come back, all these companies will jump back in. That's the kind of company that runs CrimeCon. And the second that they feel that they can't make money on CrimeCon anymore, even though all of these cases will be unsolved and all of these families will still be hurting and everything, they'll close up shop and wipe their hands of it and move on to something else. That's why I don't go. Boy, I'm on a rant tonight. I'm glad I brought my soapbox. So when it comes to plagiarism with crime junkies, when it comes to all of these other things, I'm not surprised. You have to remember, I'm not a little kid. I'm 49 years old. Maybe it helps that I come from an entertainment background. Maybe it helps that I worked with magicians for 4 years who their number one thing was they never wanted to be somebody to claim that they were ripping another magician off. That is like the biggest sin a magician can make. And I got to know many magicians when I worked for that show. And the biggest thing was if they were coming up with new tricks, that they weren't ripping anybody off because that would ruin their reputation. Same way with comedians. The big problem, like Robin Williams. Robin Williams, as much as everybody loved him, there was a reason he didn't do stand-up anymore. Why? Because he ended up getting a reputation of ripping other comics off. He would go to their shows, like these kind of unknown shows, sit in the back, take their jokes, and then put them into his own act. That's why he didn't do any stand-up anymore. That's why he was just into acting. He couldn't write his own programs anymore. Now, for all those people who are defending crime junkies and everything else, are you also going to defend comedians that rip other comedians off and give them no credit? So, are these people evil? Or are they anything? I don't know. I don't know any of these other hosts. I don't know them. I don't know them. But You know, if you're going to do that and you want to rip other people off, then go do it covering movies and video games, you know, and anime and all these other podcasts that are popular out there. But I think when it comes to true crime and disappearances and murders and everything else, there has to be a standard that is much, much higher. Okay? The other problem about plagiarism is that it continues mistakes. It continues mistakes. You go and copy and paste, that mistake gets copied and pasted over and over and over and over. Yes, LaForger, I know about that. White comics going to black cubs. Yeah, that's absolutely true, LaFord. Yes, absolutely true. Horrible. Horrible. And this is one of the reasons that with Unfound, we aren't just a place where you get to hear from the people who have been affected most by these disappearances. It also gives them a chance to correct the record because they know that there are mistakes out there. Reporters doing a bad job, reporters just making mistakes. We're all human. It gives them an opportunity to come on the program and correct the record at least the best as we can do it. And I think we've had an effect in that area. I know for, being that Megan Good also gets ripped off, sometimes, with cases we cover, I will notice a mistake on her site comparing it to what the guest told me, and I'll tell her about it. And slowly but surely, we try to get rid of the mistakes, at least with the disappearances that Unfound covers. So, it's just bad. It's just bad. Podcasting is such a great medium. It is such a great medium. It's easy to listen to. It fits on your phone. You can listen to in the car, at the gym. You can take it anywhere. And in my personal opinion, all these people who are taking the easy way out, copying and pasting, plagiarism and everything, are blowing it. They have one of the most powerful, even though it's still a kind of a niche communication, they have this powerful medium and not doing enough with it. It would be like having a piano with 88 keys and only using 10 of them. And it's a damn shame. It's a damn shame. So, what else can I say? I realize probably a lot of podcasters are going to find out about this and be really pissed off at me, but my attitude on any of this has not changed. Not changed once. Not changed once since I started to get wind of all of this. So, and I know they've had to take down some of their episodes and they issued an apology and everything else as if they don't know what plagiarism is, as if they didn't know what they were doing is wrong. Like I said, I don't even care if people rip me off. I really don't care. I don't know how I would keep track of it. I don't know how I would stop it or anything else. All I know is that if that person was doing their own work, they wouldn't be covering Unfound cases. They'd be covering other cases and doing it the right way, and everybody wins when that happens. I can remember back when I was an independent filmmaker in Las Vegas, and I was not a very good filmmaker. I can admit it. But here's what I always knew, and there were other groups who were doing films in Las Vegas, and I'm as competitive a guy as there is in just about anything. This is why I hope next weekend I don't stink over in Orlando. But I was hoping that these other groups and film clubs and everything else were going to make great movies because making great movies and independent movies in Las Vegas would bring more people in to check out what is going on in Las Vegas. If everybody sucks, that doesn't help anybody. You could compare it to like the music scene in Seattle, late 80s, early 90s with grunge. The reason that Soundgarden and Pearl Jam and Nirvana, etc., 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 all prospered is because one of them was good and then another was good, and it just rising waters raises all boats. Okay? The problem is in podcasting, when you have a bunch of people, and the biggest news about podcasting is true crime podcasters are plagiarists. You know what? The water lowers. That water lowers for everybody, including the people like myself who don't plagiarize. There is no doubt in my mind about that. When people are good, it helps everybody. When some people are bad, it hurts everybody. And Lord knows there's enough disappearance cases to go around. I would have no problem if there were 10 other programs like Unfound doing kind of the same thing that I do, interviewing families and then picking out their own cases. I would have no problem with that at all. At all. I don't care. I don't care. Because there's surely enough cases and, unfortunately, enough to go around. But if they're all going to do it wrongly, that only hurts me. That doesn't help me. Even though I'm competitive and I want Unfound to be the best, in the end, that hurts me more than it helps me. And helps the cases, helps the program, helps the assistants, helps all of you. Okay? And plagiarism is not a victimless crime. Even though I will say that I personally don't feel like a victim, but I realize is that it's not a victimless crime. Okay? Because I'm just, you know me, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. That's not going to change. That's not going to change. And I'm not going to try to track all these people down. And I get told, I know, you the listeners, you tell me when you see something or someone who stole something from Unfound, an Unfound interview and everything else. And the reason they can do that is because it's so obvious, because we talk about more information than is out there. At least that's what the listeners tell me. So it's a huge problem. What else have I written here? I think you just have to understand that when most of the time, when you hear a podcast host saying research, they didn't do any research. They didn't do it. I know what research is. You know, Emily knows. Emily knows how hard it is to try to track down people and talk to them and call them and to verify something. I know how this case that I'm working on behind the scenes, I've been trying to call a guy for 3 months, won't call me back, and it makes me very suspicious. That's research. Calling people over and over and over and getting stood up and not people calling you back. I know what research is, trying to verify things. Okay? These people don't do that. They don't do that. So, and this is not to pick on crime junkies. The reason we're talking about them is because they're the ones in the news. Don't think that they're the only ones. Don't think that they're the only ones that do this. And I know some people just want to be entertained. They don't care if their host is ripping, them off and everything else. I want my listeners to Unfound to have high standards. Okay? And this is something that I want to tell all of you. All right? Unfound is not a cult of personality. See, my impression is that these other hosts expect their listeners to come to their defense when they do something wrong, like this. And I've seen it. Oh, it's no big deal. Oh, well, they're still getting the word out. And oh, look, instead they raised money and everything else. Don't be like that. Don't do that. If I ever do something wrong, we can talk about it. Okay? This is not a cult of personality. Okay? If you think that I've done something wrong, we can talk about it. We can have a good conversation about it. Now, I may not agree with you. And in the end, I may continue just to do things the way I do it. But we can talk about it. All right? I am not infallible. But once again, I get the impression that many hosts just want their listeners just to go along with whatever they do and be mindless automatons. I don't. That's the reason we don't do theories on Unfound. I want you all to be free thinkers. I want to have your opinions. All right? Use your minds, your high IQs. Use them. So it's, once again, I'm just going to say it, it's just bad. It's just bad. Yeah, Cherie knows more than anybody else that I'm willing to talk to anybody about anything, even if they disagree with me. Cherie knows that probably more, and we'll just leave it at that, Cherie. But and I'm glad that Cherie, you can say that. I'm glad that you feel that what I'm saying here is the truth, being that we've had several conversations about different things behind the scenes. I'm glad that you can say that. Thank you. Um. So, and the other thing I'll say before I move on to the Thomas Brown topic is that um, I'm not convinced that these programs, Crime Junkies being number one, everything, I'm not convinced that they are as popular as they've made themselves out to be. I certainly think that there is a lot of cooking the books, really overstating how popular these programs are. There's a lot of way to gain the system, to get downloads, to get this, to get that. And I'm absolutely convinced there's a lot of the cooking of the books that is going on. I'll give you maybe the best example that I can think of. I realize that Unfound is not the number one true crime program out there, and I don't think it's ever will be that way, and that's fine with me simply because of the niche that Unfound is in, missing persons cases. I think a lot of people, want resolutions. They want a crime solved at the end or something like that, whereas all of our cases are open-ended and unsolved. But if all of these programs are so dang popular and they have all these listeners and everything, why is it that they can't say that they've moved as many cases forward as Unfound has? I have less listeners, but we've made more of an impact than they have. And I just wonder if these plagiarists out there realize that, do they not realize by copying other people and doing these things that the day they stop doing their program, it will be like that the program never existed in the first place? They are not leaving a mark at all. At all. In fact, you could look at some of the podcasts that have gone away in the last, let's say, 2 years. Think about some of those true crime podcasts that you were listening to in the last 2 years, and now they're not here anymore. What was it? Thinking Sideways, Insight, a few others. Does anybody miss them at all? Anybody miss them at all? Are there any criminals out there who are saying, "Whew, I'm glad that podcast isn't there because they were really putting a lot of pressure on us. I'm really glad that's not around anymore so we don't have to look out for ourselves." Whereas I'd like to think, and of course Unfound isn't going anywhere, but I would like to think, and Lord knows, some of the things that have been sent to me, I know that there are people out there who are worried about what we're doing. I know it for a fact. And I know what the guests think about Unfound and how we've helped them both, publicly and privately. And I think all of them would be let down if Unfound, disappeared. Why? Because I think that we've had an effect on these people's lives. Whereas I don't know these other things that have gone away. I don't know if anybody misses them at all. Anybody. Even the people who are listening to it every week. It's not around anymore. They just move on to something else. And here at Unfound, we're just trying to do something different. We're just trying to do something different. But like I said, even though I don't plagiarize, I do realize that it hurts me. Because it hurts, I think people from the outside say, once again, oh, those true crime people, they're just rip-off artists. They're just ripping off the real reporters that are doing the real work and everything else. And Unfound and other programs that are doing original work, I guess you could put The Vanished in there. I know Marissa does her own interviews, etc. Just throw them all in the same group. They're all just rip-off artists. They're just stealing from other people's work. We don't have to pay attention to them. Nothing. So I don't know. So there's that. So that's my attitude about plagiarism. Of course, I never have to worry about it because we do all original stuff here. We do all original interviews. And I'd like to, and as much as some of my listeners have been worried about, we don't want to slander this person and everything, I haven't been sued once. I haven't been sued once. Yeah. Well, thank you, Judy. Once again, I apologize. I know a lot of people were commenting while I was doing this rant, and I apologize for not reading all of it. But crime junkies have been around since 2017. They're already accused of plagiarism. Been around since 2016. And we've not been sued once. And I think it's because we do things the right way. Yes, we do name suspects and everything, but we're always clear. We're just talking about the facts. We can't help it if some of these things make these people feel or look guilty. We can't help that. Can't help it. That's why we don't do theories, and as much as some of my guests would love to say and point fingers, and we don't go after people because that's what gets you in trouble. So there you go. Oh my, okay, so it's been an hour and I still have Tom Brown to talk about. Okay, let's move on to that, and I think that's why a lot of people have tuned in tonight as well, being that it's such breaking news. It Here's something that all of us are going to have to realize right at this second now. There is not one law enforcement officer on this planet that is now investigating Tom Brown's murder. Okay, not one. It sucks. But I just want to put that to you in the starkest terms that I can. Okay? That's what that statement meant today. That as of this point, they will not be working on it. That does not mean that it is done, it is suspended. Now, what does that mean? Well, I'm talking to my Texas law enforcement confidant earlier today after this news came out. What it means is that they've just run out of information. They've run out of everything that's been collected. They just don't know where to go with it. Now, as far as the statement, any reasonable person, now that's crazy. And in talking to, once again, this person that I know who has a lot of experience in this area, this person also found that statement to be odd. No reasonable person would ever be able to. Well, I think Unfound has a lot of reasonable listeners, and they certainly believe that something of a criminal nature happened. Okay, so I don't know who they're talking about, reasonable people. Now, if they're saying that they could never go to trial with it or something, okay. Okay. But the reasonable person part of it certainly threw me for a loop. Now, what does this all mean? And Carrie says there's a huge difference between suspended and closed. That's certainly true. Now, here's what this means. And because I'm not a plagiarist, I'm going to give credit for this quote. And it comes from Winston Churchill. I think what all of you have to know now is this is not the end. And it is not the beginning of the end. In fact, probably what this means is that this is the end of the beginning into the investigation of Thomas Brown's disappearance and murder. It's the end of the beginning. The government, both the sheriff's office, the attorney general's office, the FBI, the Texas Rangers, they have given it their best shot, and now they're kind of going like this. We don't know what to do. Okay? Now, the reason that Winston Churchill said that, it was in 1942, and he said that after England had defeated the Nazis for the very first time in northern Africa at the Second Battle of El Alamein. And that quote is of a larger speech that he gave, but that was the memorable quote from that speech. And so, what does this mean? This means that really the work for the rest of us starts because nobody else is going to do it now. Nobody else is going to do it. And what I mean by that is we have to stop theorizing and we have to stop spreading rumors. And I get them too. I wouldn't say that I necessarily spread any rumors, but I hear a lot of rumors. All the talk has to stop. People are going to have to start, because once again, no law enforcement officer in the state of Texas cares about it now. People are going to start having to look for evidence themselves. Do not break the law. Do not do anything illegal, unethical, immoral, anything like that. But it may be that many people who care about this case are now going to have to get out of their comfort zone. I think it's great putting the signs up and everything else. But I think at this point, people are going to have to be a lot more proactive in this. Now, what does that mean? I'm not sure. But the time for talk is over. You know, as long as the government is doing their job, it's easy for all of us, including myself, to just sit back and comment. You know, it's no different than a sports commentator. The game is happening, and we're calling the play-by-play. We're trying to theorize what's going to happen next. We're trying to figure out who's going to win. Well, that game is over. Now we're the ones who have to be on the playing field. We're the ones that have to do the work. That's all I really, can say about it. And as Carrie made a good point, it's not closed, it's suspended. Now, unfortunately, this, I don't know if it confirms it, but it lends more credence to a suspicion that I've had for too long now. But Penny and I have talked about it, and I think that I can voice it now. My concern is that due to the touchiness of all this, no matter what you think happened, and I'm not getting into that, but this is such a touchy thing that it very well may be that I had the suspicion that the Texas Rangers and others were going to wipe their hands of Thomas Brown's case until elections were done in Hemphill County next year. I've had that thought for a long time. In fact, I think that, I don't know how many people privately I've expressed it to, but a few. And that there are so many suspicions. And that, there have been so many other things not connected to Tom Brown's case that have come out. That I had the idea that not being able, once again, not a lot of evidence, and I don't want to even get into this thing where the Texas Rangers are covering stuff up. I don't believe that. Okay, this is a tough case, as every disappearance case is. But when you have a situation where it is a fact that the missing, now murdered young man had a run-in with the future sheriff the year before, that is a fact. All right, that is a fact. And I'm not going to go any farther than that. It makes the investigation touchy. And I can't help but think that they are suspending it and just saying, you know what? All of this news is now out there. All of this is, and now it's up to the voters of Hemphill County to determine what happens next. Okay? So I've thought that for a while. I've really thought that because of how long this has all happened, how long the Texas Rangers have been working on this, and um, you weren't hearing much. Not a lot was getting out. We still don't know who found Thomas's remains, which is mind-boggling. So the work is now ours. Everybody's going to move on. And that's why I say this is the end of the beginning. The beginning was the government giving its best shot at trying to figure out what really happened that night with Thomas Brown. Now we are in the situation, as most of Unfound's guests are, where it's up to us. Okay? These people who have been living with a disappearance for 20, 30 years, Joyce Rivatuso, 40 years, at some point they figure out, you know what? The government's work into this is over. They've gone as far as they can go. Now it's our time. Now, once again, don't do anything illegal, no vigilante justice and everything, but you need to start questioning things. All this stuff that and one thing I do want to point out, for those people who live in Hemphill County, I don't want to get any more emails about how afraid you are. Okay, it's over. It's over. I just don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear how afraid you are of this. I'm afraid to say this. I'm afraid to do that. I'm sorry, but I just don't respect you anymore. Okay? If I can go to Hemphill County like I did, cruising around in a car with Penny, her son, her other son Tucker, and a friend, and go to these locations and take pictures and everything else, and I've been the point man on this since last summer, at some point, the Canadian residents have to take ownership for it too and put their fears to the side. Okay? It's now up to you and to, you can forget about the Canadian record. They don't want to touch it. Okay? The most things they've done is they've criticized Penny herself more than anything else in this case. You're going to have to rely on media organizations outside of the area, in Amarillo, in Dallas, in Houston, in San Antonio, these big stations that people follow. You're going to have to get them engaged to see what's going on here, because you can forget about the local people. They don't want anything to do with it. Okay? They just don't. But for those of you that believe Thomas was murdered, and you believe that murderer or murderers are still walking around Canada and Hemphill County and elsewhere, you're going to have to start all being private investigators. That's what you're going to have to do. I don't know how any way else to put this. So that's what I mean by the beginning of the end. It's no different than maybe like a chess match. There's that opening, two chess grandmasters making their opening moves and getting everything in position. That part of this match of the public and the government, or the government versus whoever murdered Thomas, that part is over. It's now the mid-game where the public has to take over. And if you hear things, you need to research them. Just don't hear something and then start spreading a rumor. Go find the source. Find out if it's true. If somebody said they've heard something, look into it. See if it can be verified. Just don't go to the telephone and start telling people what you heard. That's not going to help anybody. So, it's I have not talked to Penny. Well, I had a message exchange with Penny. I believe I'm going to talk to her tomorrow. Of course, anything that she and I talk about would have to be confidential. But the theorizing and the rumorizing and the fear and all of these things, It just has to end now. We had the luxury. Many people had the luxury of just sitting back and kind of I wouldn't say necessarily enjoying it, but um, getting a lot of attention for what they were talking about and everything. That stuff has to end now. It just it but like I said, I don't want you to think that this is the end. What Penny is now, the situation that she is now in is now the situation that most of my guests are in. No police help anymore. No government help anymore. You're going to have to figure out how to do it on your own. If you want justice, and if she believes that Thomas was murdered, and I believe that's what a majority of us, everybody in here believes, then we're going to have to solve it on our own. And we're going to have to do it in the face of a lot of people who just want this to go away. Not because they were involved in the murder or anything else. They just want everything to go back to normal. They just want peace. And as that speech once said, you want peace? Easy, just surrender. You'll have your peace. Just surrender. That's what they're saying. And there's only one way to have real peace, and that is to fight it out until somebody wins. That's real peace. Just giving up and surrendering, that's not peace. So it's a very difficult position. Carrie says they want paradise back. Well, there's no doubt that Canadian is a beautiful little town. Beautiful. Beautiful. So they just want it to go away. They think that their town's getting a bad rep and everything else, but there are bigger issues than that. There just are. But I know a lot of people are dejected. A lot of people are calling BS and everything else, and that's very easy to do. But I'm only interested in working with people who are actually ready to do work. And I think that's the attitude Penny is going to have as well. Okay? Posting signs and everything else is great. There couldn't be more awareness for Thomas Brown's case in the Texas state of Texas. At some point, you have to start being Columbo. And I know I'm showing my age with that. At some point, you have to start going around, asking questions, and making people, even if it makes you feel uncomfortable, even if it makes them feel uncomfortable, that's what has to start being done, because nobody else is going to do it. So there's that. Mandolin says Canadian record is victim shamed Penny 4 times. That's true. Troy asked me, will I be speaking to Penny regarding this anytime soon? I'm supposed to talk to her tomorrow, but like I said, any conversations that I have with her will be off the record. That's the way, of course, it always is with guests. If I can tell you anything, I will. Let's move on. So that's really all I have to say about it. This is, like I said, this is the beginning. It's not the end. It's just the end of the beginning. I get that right? Yeah, it's the end of the beginning. We move to the next phase. And that means more of your general public people being involved. I need to answer a few questions before I go tonight. I think I have to do that. Elena asked me, depression, do I ever get depression doing this, given I cover all these sad cases? Elena, if you're in here, with all of this, you have to be a happy warrior. You have to know that the fight is worth it, and as long as you believe that, you're not going to get depressed. And of course, on my job is to not let my feelings get in the way of anything. My job is to be objective. And that sometimes means giving my guests a little more truth than they've ever gotten before. So no, I don't get depressed doing this. But, in Tom Brown's case, whoever's going to be involved now and asking questions, you have to be a happy warrior. You have to have a very positive attitude and be able to accept um, failure, because you're probably going to see a lot of it, before this case once again gets going again. If you're not a happy warrior, if it's a grind, doing this, Elena, to answer your question, if this is a grind and everything else, then probably I should be doing something else. Larry asked me, what is the metric I use to judge Unfound's success? Well, obviously, compared to a lot of podcasts out there, my standard is different. My standard is, do I believe that I moved a case forward? Did we come up with new information that a guest can take back to the police department? Do we give the guest different ways, different theories on a case that they can start looking into themselves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Of course, Joyce Rivatuzo can talk to you about that, being that the disappearance of her daughters, frankly, was completely forgotten in the state of Florida until Unfound came along. Those are the measures of success. Not with downloads, not with Patreon supporters, nothing else. The measure of success for Unfound is being able to say that we've moved these cases forward in some way. A lot of them we don't, unfortunately. That's true. And I don't shy away from telling anybody that. But many we have. Many we have. And maybe that's one more thing I need to mention about the plagiarism and everything else, is that, in getting into this, she does. Yes, Troy, she does. I think since I started Unfound, it's always been about education to me. In covering these cases, what can I teach the listeners about missing persons cases? What can I teach them? And so when it comes to all these people talking about we want to have a 7-digit business and having a talent representative and all of that other stuff, my thoughts go in a different direction, and it's something that I've talked about recently with a new person who I think is going to help me with this. Is, for me, my dream is to go to college campuses and talk to criminal justice majors about all of this. I would love to be able to go to colleges, universities, and talk to future psychiatrists about trauma for missing persons victims. Talk to future FBI agents about missing persons cases, etc. TV and stuff, I'm all about trying to fix the problem. I'm all about 20 years from now, when we have people out there, that they understand missing persons cases more than we do now. So, and I just don't think that there are I don't think there is one true crime host out there that is concerned about that at all. At all. I'm not saying some haven't spoken on college campuses, but they've been there as a celebrity. Oh, look, the host of so-and-so is here, and a lot of people show up. I want to go into classrooms and talk to people about missing persons cases and teach them about them. So, thank you, Joyce. Thank you, Joyce. I deeply appreciate that. So, having said all of that, let's talk about Friday's case, the disappearance of Andy Chapman. He disappeared December 8th, 2006 from Columbus, Ohio. It's an episode I am calling Moving Violation, because he vanished in the process of moving out of a house that he was renting, where he was living. It was getting foreclosed on. He wasn't the owner. He was a renter, so he had to move out. And after he moved out, he disappeared. And so that's why it's being called Moving Violation. The guest for this episode is going to be his sister, Amy, who is in the discussion group. I'm doing the interview for that episode tomorrow morning. So I can't tell you how long the interview went or anything. I know what the outline says and everything that we're going to cover, but I'm guessing it's going to be a fairly long interview, so you can expect a fairly long episode on Friday. I also got to speak to Andy's mother, and her comments will be included in the summation section afterwards. Lots of information. I have to tell you that of all of the cases that I've covered, this case probably is in the top 5 of the most information that was given to me by Amy. Timeline of events, copies of all sorts of different types of things. Very, very impressive that she sent to me through Google Docs that I had a chance to look at. And so that's why this interview is going to be fairly technical. It's going to be long, but Amy surely knows the information well, being that she's been the one that's been putting it all together. This is a case that, of course, is 13 years old. This is a case where no cops are working on it right now, but the good thing in talking to Amy is already we've been able to figure out some new avenues of questioning and inquiry that she can do to get more information about what was going on in Andy's life at the time. Once again, getting back to Larry's question, these are the types of things that we're trying to do at Unfound. When we interact with guests, what information can we give them, insight that we have that can help move the case forward? Okay? So that is the case for this Friday. The disappearance of Andy Chapman, Columbus, Ohio, December 8th, 2006. An episode I am calling Moving Violation. And the guest is his sister, Amy Chapman. And so we had a long, I don't know if this set the record for the longest YouTube live show, but it was pretty long. So we talked about the meetup this Saturday in Houston. Volume 1 of Season 2 is coming out. Talked about the poll regarding Stephanie Clemens. Next weekend, I'll be in Orlando. Talked about the troll Christian Underkoffler. 3rd year anniversary episode coming out. Update episode coming out September 13th. Tiffany Johnson, the trial regarding Chris Revel. Talked a whole heck of a lot about plagiarism. Talked about Tom Brown and the information from today. And we also talked about the Bobcat being found as is that piece of information that was a huge question when we covered Jonathan Estes' case back in June. So there you go. The show is over. Thank you all for tuning in tonight. I hope you were comfortable for this hour and 25-minute show. I apologize that I couldn't read all of their comments tonight that you made, but I was a little bit on a roll. I think I had to say something, but I appreciate all of you tuning in tonight this Wednesday night. You will hear me on Friday, and then we will all get together, that little group of us, for the think tank on Sunday night. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much. Good night.